So we're making a Terraria-like movement-based survival game, and in the last video, I showed what I had made so far, as well as the ideas I had for the game. But recently I started working on the combat system, which is a sort of mix of grounded combat with some elements of Hi-Fi Rush and Hollow Knight. So I've planned to make a pretty advanced combat system. I have quite a few things done for the combat system already. So as you can see, depending on where my mouse is, this hitbox changes direction. I'll pick up all the items, then just equip the sword. So when I'm off of the sword and I'm not selecting it, I click, nothing happens. And then when I have the sword selected or even held out like this, and this text here is just showing you what state the player's in. So whenever I hold it, charge, and then it goes into the attack, then goes back to idle. So if I click it, it just goes to light attack. If I hold it, it charges, then goes to heavy attack. This can all be changed, like the damage and the speed of the attack can be changed. There's also a combo you can do, so you click 3 times, and then you can't click again quickly after that. You can only some spam clicking right now. You can only do 3, then you have to wait a sec. It's a bit bugged. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'll get that sorted out. This is an enemy object with a hitbox around it, so whenever I walk into it, I take damage and I'm knocked back, which is also dependent on the knockback of the enemy stats. The direction is just dependent on where the enemy is, so it just knocks me in the opposite direction of that. And then whenever I die, it just deletes the player object. Also, whenever I'm hit, it shows in the debug menu the damage that's dealt to me. Okay, now actually attacking the enemy. I can click to do a light attack, like I showed a minute ago, hold to do a heavy attack, knocks it back further. That's pretty much it for the basic attacks. Obviously, it looks very underwhelming now because there are no visuals or full effects, but in terms of how it works, it's very solid at the moment. I also just added different attacks depending on if you're holding W or S. So if you hold W, you look in the air, you can attack downwards. And if you jump on top of an enemy, you can pogo along it, exactly like Hollow Knight, which is pretty cool. Again, you can only do 3. And then you have to wait a few seconds, so pogo 3 times, get out of there. And with the pogoing, or any down attack really, I click, has to wait a second, so click, wait attack speed, then it actually attacks. With attacking downwards, it doesn't do that, it just instantly attacks, because it would be a lot harder to pogo if you had to time it that perfectly with the attack speed. So I just decided it would be a lot easier to do it this way. It's a lot harder to pull off than actually just normally hitting an enemy, so I feel like it's balanced in that aspect. It will probably be the way you kill things quicker, obviously, but yeah, it's a lot harder to pull off. But just like I showed in the last video, these accessories do still work. I've changed the way they work completely though, which is why this video's taken so long to come out, which I'll show in a bit. Also, just to show off what stats I have for a weapon, if I look in the debug menu again and I click, it prints the damage, speed, range, and knockback of the sword, which can also be changed with accessories. And then this also shows the attack combo you're on, so 1, 2, 3. You can't go above 3. Sometimes it loops back to 1 twice for some reason. 1, 1, 2, 3, yeah. I think I know what the issue is. I'll sort that out in a bit though. But yeah, that's the combat system so far. I do have more ideas for it. I'm also thinking of changing up the way the attack speed works. So instead of clicking, waiting a sec, and then it actually enabling the hitbox, I might instantly enable the hitbox. Then, if you want to perform another attack after that, it will wait a few seconds. So the attack speed is not the speed of you actually attacking the weapon, but the cooldown between attacks, if that makes sense. So attacking feels more consistent, because it kind of feels like there's just input delay currently. Obviously, without the animations, it looks a bit weird, but I feel like even then it would feel odd. Yeah, there's still a lot more I want to add. But yeah, for now, it's fine. And now the code of everything. I have so much to go through. All of these scripts are completely new. Even the player script is the current one I'm showing. This used to be a lot bigger. This is the whole script now. And so what this script does, it basically just holds references to all of the other components within the player scene. The inventory data, the state machines, the hitboxes, some of the movement stuff, a gravity function that I can call within movement states, so that I can just apply gravity, getting the inventory. And this is just the label for the combat states, setting up the slide cooldown, and then this is just a mouse position variable that I need for the position of the hitbox. And this is the movement state machine. This is the script of this node, the actual movement machine itself, which basically controls all of these nodes below it, is able to change things about the player itself, the player node. The change state function basically exits the current state and then enters the new state. This just continuously updates the state, allowing it to actually work. And this is just a physics version of that. Then the actual movement state script, this isn't used anywhere. It's just a script that holds data for the actual states. So this has a class name of movement state, and then it just holds the movement state machine script, direction, body, stats, collision box, and then these are the actual functions within every state. So this is what happens when you enter the state. This is just a physics update, which I use for the current state. Then I use the update to just update to the next state. And then the exit is what happens when you exit this state and then move on to the next state. This is the idle state. So the class name is idle, and it extends the movement state script. So again, this isn't actually connected to anything. It is just holding data for these actual state scripts, which works by extending from it. Every state script has the states it can actually transition to as variables. In the idle script, I'm able to move to the move state, jump state, and crouch state. So if I click on the idle node, over here it says move state, jump state, crouch state. These are the actual nodes that it's connected to. Because I've written the movement state class name as defining this variable, I can just click on here and it only registers the nodes which have the movement state class name. So I set this one to move because this is the move state. And then whenever I have movement state machine change state, I can just input the state I want to change to whenever a specific thing happens. So all the idle state does is decelerate whenever it's moved to. So whenever I go from moving to idle, it decelerates until it reaches 0. So it is not moving currently. And then on the enter one, I'll just have like the idle animation whenever I make it. And also in the physics state, I just apply gravity and then move and slide so it's able to actually move. And then the actual update function is how I move to the next state. The direction variable is set to change if either left or right is pressed. If direction is not equal to 0, so if either of these buttons are pressed, it moves to the move state. If the jump button is pressed and it's on the floor, then it goes to the jump state. The crouch button's pressed, moves to crouch state. And then I haven't got anything in exit because I don't need anything in exit. And this is pretty much the same for all of the scripts. I mean, obviously this is different. There's a lot more code in this one. Yeah, this basically controls all of the movement. It is basically the same as the code I had in the other big player script, just a bit better. Whenever I do need to get a stat from the stats component, I do create a new variable that just gets it a lot easier. So I just get the acceleration stat, and I have also changed the way the movement works. So instead of max sprint speed, max walk speed, max crouch speed, I just have a max speed and an acceleration. So the speed at which you gain speed, I guess, and then the max speed you can be. And then direction is set. This is walking and sprinting. So if the sprint button's not pressed, you move, increasing your speed by the acceleration. If sprint is pressed, it times the acceleration by 1.25 and the max speed by 2. And this is just the deceleration. If you change direction mid-movement, it just like slows down a lot quicker. The reason I have wall sliding and jumping in the movement script, if I just have it in the jump script, it makes it a lot less consistent. I found that just having it here is a lot nicer. Then apply gravity, it can move. And then if you're at direction 0, it just goes to the idle state. If you press the crouch button and slide cooldown is 0, and your current speed matches a certain threshold, you go into the slide state. And then if all of this is false, then you just go into the crouch state. And if you press jump, it just goes into the jump state. Jump state, it instantly jumps as soon as you enter the state. And then I have these variables here because you can move in air. It's the exact same code as the movement code. So you can either sprint or move in air normally, and wall sliding and applying gravity. And then if your body is just on the floor, then it just goes back to the move state. So this is how the slide works. So it does just set the speed here, but if you're moving a certain direction, it reduces the speed depending on the direction. So if you're moving in a negative direction, it just adds it positively until it reaches a certain point, then it just goes to 0 and then would go into the crouch state, which happens if you reach 0 or you release crouch. But if you are in the slide state and you press jump, it goes into the slide jump state. And then this is just the cooldown. So whenever you exit it, it just sets the cooldown to cooldown time. And then slide jump, as soon as you enter it, it launches you forward and up. And then if you're starting to move downwards, it just takes you back into the move state. Right, that was the movement state machine. It seems pretty complex, but this is a lot more manageable, honestly, than what I had before. Because if there's a bug with a certain movement aspect, I can just fix it. Or if I need to like change a certain thing, I wouldn't have to go through the entire old movement script and just have to check through the whole thing. Okay, combat state machine. This works the exact same way as the player one, with changing the state physics process. But this also has an on-item attack, which is connected to the item component here, which I'll get into soon. But basically, whenever you use an item that is a weapon, it activates that. Then this is the hitbox positions. So I set the direction that the mouse is relative to the actual player, and the hitbox width and total offset of it. So if you press up, it just sets the offset so that it is above the player. And then if you press down, it sets it so it's below the player. And then this one is if neither of them are pressed, it goes in the direction of the mouse. So the total offset is times by the direction, which is just relative to the mouse position and the position of the body. This is the combat state. It's pretty much the exact same as the movement state, with a few more variables to signify if it's attacking and the current attack. The combat idle state is just when you return to a state where you're not attacking, which is where most of the cooldowns happen, setting the variables to so that it's not attacking and turning off the hitbox so that it can't collide with enemies' hitboxes. If your current attack is more than 3, you have to wait like half a second, and then your current attack is 0. And you can't attack if your current attack is 3 or above. And this is just a combo cooldown. It's initially set to 0, and then as the idle state is happening, it just increases until it's 1, and then if it's above 1, it just sets the current attack to 0. And this is just the transition state update, which has the pogo attack in it. So if the hitbox hit variable, which just signifies if you actually hit something, it's true, and the attack direction is 2, which is down, and it's not on the floor, then you move upwards, and even if none of this happens, the hit is set to false. And then if attacking is true and the current attack is less than 3, and if use items pressed and you have a held weapon, and if you're not hovering over a slot, sets the combo cooldown to 0, adds 1 to the current attack, prints the current attack just for debugging, testing purposes, and then it moves to the charge state, which is the main way I've done the heavy and light attack. There is also a block state, which is now kind of just a placeholder. It's literally got nothing in it. If you release it, it just goes back to the combat idle. Okay, the charge. This can move to the light and heavy attack. This is before you actually attack. Basically, all it does is if you release the use item button, it actually attacks. So click, goes into charge, release it instantly, attacks. But if you hold the button, it increases the charge time variable, and if the charge time variable is above the charge time stats of the player or the weapon, it does the heavy attack state. And then when you exit it, obviously it changes the charge time back to 0. Okay, then the light attack. The way I've done attacking in general is that the hitboxes themselves hold stat variables, and then I just set the stat variables in the actual hitboxes themselves as the stats the player has. This makes it easier to have the heavy attack do more damage, knockback, attack range than the light attack. That is the main reason I did that. I might do it in a better way soon, like just times the base stats by something and just have one variable instead of doing it all separately, but now this works. So then all the variables are set, the attack time increases, and if the attack time is more than the attack speed and the direction is not down, it goes back to the idle. And the reason it goes back to the idle is disables the hitbox. So when the light attack function is exited, it enables the hitbox, so you're actually able to hit. Then going back to the idle, waiting like a millisecond, disables it again. So it's the exact same with the heavy attack. It just increases the stats of the hitbox, and that's about it. Okay, the hitbox. This is basically just a component of any entity that would have stats, basically. The body, which would be a character body 2D, which can be anything, like an enemy, player. It needs to connect to the stats. It needs to connect to the item component, which manages the items, and then has its own collision. Also connects to the combat state machine. Has its own variables, like I said, so it has its own attack damage, range, and knockback, which are set within the actual attack states here. It sets its collision layers. When it's enabled, the collision itself is disabled, so you can't just walk into an enemy and it hits it. And this right now is just for testing purposes. It just sets the body's stats itself if it is a hostile, which is the test enemy, and it just keeps it enabled at all times, just for testing right now. I will change this soon. The Hurtbox is a lot bigger. This is things that can be hit and actually change the stats of what it's connected to. It needs a body, needs stats, and that's about it. It has knockback variables. So the knockback velocity is set. and the body's velocity is set to the knockback velocity, and then the body moves when it collides with the actual hitbox itself, and this is just so it can't attack itself, basically. And this just sets the hitbox hit variable to true, and then if damage exists, then it does the attacked function, which is here, and it carries on the hitbox object that actually hit it in the on area entered function, and then if the hitbox doesn't have any stats, then it just returns. The damage taken is this, which is a pretty good calculation for determining the damage it should do if the entity has defense. So the more defense, obviously, the less damage it does, but it would never reach 0 damage unless the defense is insanely high. This just allows the defense to actually work. And then the health stat of the current entity this is connected to is damaged by the damage taken amount, and then printing the damage for testing purposes. This is the actual knockback. The direction is body's global position minus the hitbox's body's global position, and then it's normalized. And then the knockback velocity, direction times hitbox.knockback times 10. I times the actual knockback of the stat by 10 because it would look kind of weird with the other stats. Like, for it to be somewhat effective, you'd have to have 100 knockback as a stat, which I don't know. I feel like 10 would look better than 100 just on a weapon's description or something. Yeah, I just feel like that would be nicer to look at instead of really, really high numbers compared to like 10 damage. So yeah. And then if the health is less than or equal to 0, it just deletes the object. This is the item component. So in the player, I have a components node which holds 3 different components that can work across any entity. This is when an item is used. A certain item is used, it goes down to here and calls the function linked to it. For the consumable one, the hunger stat is increased by the consumable hunger increase. The health stat is increased by the consumable health increase. And that's all that happens, really. The weapon, if your attack cooldown is more than 0, then it returns. And then it emits the attack function with the current weapon that's held. I don't think I'm using this anywhere actually yet properly. I know I have it in the combat state machine on item attack here. The weapon variable isn't actually being used here. I could change the way this works so I don't need this at some point, but for now I'll leave it there to just set the attacking thing to true for certain things. Yeah, that's the item component, the stats component. I actually had different variations of this, but this I found is the best one because not only is it like not a big script at all, but it allows me to add any stat I want to the stats resource that this uses, and I would not need to change anything about this script, and this works on any entity I want as well. So this has a stats resource connected to it, so go to stats. It has all of these stats: the vital stats, regeneration stats, movement stats, harvesting stats, combat stats. I added harvesting and combat stats and regen stats since last time, so health, hunger, stamina, mana regen, harvesting damage, harvesting speed, harvesting range, or when I add like tools and stuff, attack damage, attack speed, charge time, attack range, knockback. The stat modifiers, which is the new way I'm doing equipment and everything like that. So these are the base stats, and these are the current max stats it can have. And then the held weapon is the weapon you're currently holding. Then the actual current stats. Already, the current stats are set to the max stats, and the stats are recalculated beforehand, which is another function down here. This just clamps the current stats to the max stats so it can't go over the max stats. So the recalculate is the main thing of this script, which adds the stat modifiers onto the actual stats themselves. So stats is a duplicate of base stats. And then the flat modifiers. The way weapons work in this game so far is basically when you hold a weapon, it adds onto the stats within the stats component. So say a weapon you're holding has 10 damage, it adds to this. And the reason that is so that you can equip an equipment with damage increase, where you wouldn't really be able to easily add stats onto a weapon you're holding. It would have to be within this stats thing as well. So if you're holding a weapon, get these stats within that weapon, then it continues. It sets the weapon value, so the weapon stats values, and then it just sets stats within the stats variable in this stats component to the stats of the weapon. And this is just flat modifiers for any equipment that you equip. So any modifiers in the modifier, stat modifier, it just adds onto it as a flat bonus. And then percentage modifiers, it's basically the same, but it just adds the percentage onto the end instead of the flat bonus. And this just checks if the stat exists within the stat resource. So this sets the equipment modifiers. So any modifiers that you equip within the equipment inventory, it equals the modifiers within this script. And then this is the same, it just sets the held weapon to the weapon you're currently holding. And this is just a stats resource, has all of the stats within it. And I could add any stats I want to this at any time, and I wouldn't need to change this stats component script. And this is the stats modifier, which has the stat name, which can be any of these. It has to be the exact same. So if I wanted a max health modifier, I would have to type this, max health exactly like that. And then the flat bonus, which is a float, so it could be anything, percentage bonus, float could be anything. The equipment component detects a change in the equipment inventory, sets the equipment when it applies the equipped stats, and then sets the equipment modifiers, calls this function. And this is the new equipment resource. Before it had all of the stats you could have, but now it's just this. It's really simple. I go to the test accessory. All I need to do now is I click add element, and then within it I type the stat name, so max health, and then a flat bonus or a percentage bonus. So just that, and it works. And if I wanted to add attack damage, I could also do that. But the weapon resource has its own stats, because that is how this works. It adds the stats from the weapon to the stats of the stats component. I do have a modifier here just in case, though, if I'd ever want to add like movement speed to a weapon, for example. If you held a weapon, it would add movement speed as like a special effect or something. Could be cool. And then the test enemy script just applies gravity, really. That's all this does. But in the actual node itself, it has a hitbox, hurtbox, a collision, and a stats component, so I'm able to hit it and it works. Alright, so that's everything I've changed. Basically, the whole game's different now. But yeah, the overall idea of combat I had is in these notes I made. So the combat will have 2 attacks for weapon types, heavy and light, which I've done with the light attack and heavy attack. Tapping the attack button and heavy attacks are holding for a certain amount of time. Yeah, attack speed variable could change with attack speed accessories alongside normal attack speed. I will have a visual bar that shows how long you hold it for, or just like particles that come off the player whenever you reach the attack speed charge time. Happens a moment after it hits the heavy attack point of the bar, but you let go as it hits to attack slightly quicker, adding an element of skill to it. I might do this still. So if you charge up, then release the moment it fully charges up, it instantly attacks. But if you let go a certain amount of time after, or just keep holding it, it does it a little bit after. It would make the combat more interesting and timing based and skill expressive, I guess. I might do that. Combo aspect comes from doing a light heavy attack in a certain order. For example, light heavy light. Different attacks depending on the combo. I might still do that. It might be the same attacks, so maybe heavy 1, heavy 2, heavy 3, light 1, light 2, light 3. But it just does it in a different order depending on what order you do it in. I might do that. Each weapon type and subtype also have different attacks. Both attacks will be done with left click, yeah. And right click will be block. So it's very similar actually to Hytale's combat system, which came out recently. And Grounded's as well, very similar to Grounded's. You can also do up, down, sprint, light, and heavy attacks. With the light up, for example, just hitting upwards for enemies that are above the player. If you hold W and then hold the attack button to do a heavy attack, you hit you and the enemy up in the air, so you can combo them mid-air, and then you can down heavy, slam them into the ground. I feel like that'd be cool. Magic ranged would also have this, but will work differently. Ranged will have an attack that shoots multiple arrows upwards that land around the player. Yeah, so if you do like an up heavy with a bow, for example, it just has like a spray of arrows up in the air that fall down. Right click will be the block button, which will either use the weapon to block or a shield you have equipped. So if you have like a two-handed weapon, you'd probably just use that for a shield or to block or parry. If you have a one-handed, you could just use the shield you have equipped. Certain magic weapons, or could be an upgraded skill tree for magic weapons, will have a magic shield that would be powerful for blocking but can only take a certain amount of hits until it breaks for a certain amount of time. So I was thinking like if you had a spell book or something, you could just like have a big shield in front of you which you can use in any direction. So wherever the mouse is, it points in that direction. Be really good for blocking projectiles. The grapple can also be used within combos, so grappling hook. Knock enemy into the air with an up heavy. Smash enemy towards ground with down heavy. And then as they're falling down, you grapple the enemy, you pull towards them, and you land on top of them, and you like ride them along the floor. That would be so cool to implement. So long as I get the grappling hook working, I don't feel like it would be much of an issue to do. But it would mainly be used to grapple towards enemies, pull towards enemies, depending on the size of the enemy and upgrades unlocked in skill tree. So maybe the pulling towards the enemy would be a skill you get in the skill tree, or even being able to attack enemies with it would be a skill. And the current progress I've done is... so the movement's done, I'd say. I could add stuff to it, but the basics are there. The stat system's definitely done. The inventory system, I'd say, is done. Equipment system's done, I'd say, as well. I'm still implementing different items like tools and probably going to make consumables better. And I need to actually add placeable objects, but that's still in progress. Entities and enemies, obviously still in progress. Just implemented the first enemy. Combat system, very much still in progress. So I need to add the up heavy attack, the parrying, the down heavy, different variants of it. And then all of this stuff I'll do after this. I'm probably going to move on to the basic tile block destruction after this, setting up the tiles and everything. Then I'll probably go into the procedural generation. Crafting system will probably be last, honestly, because I feel like that'd be the least needed currently. Getting all the basic stuff like being able to destroy tiles and generate a world and then building stuff would probably be above all that. So yeah, things I do need to do though for the combat system specifically. I need to add visuals, the sprinting attack, like dash forward into an attack, heavy up attack, probably gonna make the directional attacks better, maybe having them in different states, so add more states to the combat state machine, maybe a neutral light, neutral heavy, up light, stuff like that. Could also change where the hitbox placement is inside the combat states, so it's not within the combat state machine like here in this long bit of code. Could have it separately within each state. Also, this was just a bug I found I need to fix. Other stuff I need to do is just clean up the player node because it's kind of messy at the moment. Another thing I'd thought about, so whenever I'm hovering over a weapon for like the description, I don't want the actual stats of the weapon, like the stats of the weapon and the stats of the player added together instead of just the base weapon stats. I would have to change a few things. I need to implement tools into the stats component so they would also add to the stats. And I still want to add special abilities such as like a dash or a double jump for accessories. So that's all I need to do in the near future. But yeah, that's the combat system I've done so far. I think it's pretty solid so far. I mean, obviously it needs to be a lot better. The movement's great, honestly, so far. Not much I'd add to it, honestly. But yeah, sorry this took so long. I've been doing a lot and this has taken so long, especially because I needed to rewrite everything. And I will probably continue to need to rewrite most things, but it won't take as long as this though, because I actually have a good platform to build off of now with the state machines and everything and the components. But yeah, next video will probably be the tile destruction and resource gathering stuff, which is cool. Maybe even block placement as well. But yeah, that's the video. Like and subscribe or whatever. Next video probably in like a month or so, a few months. This takes time. This takes a lot of time. And also, I have an idea for another game that I want to make soon, another little project. And I feel like it would be very cool to do alongside this. Or maybe it's a one-off thing soon, I don't know. But yeah, bye!